So Tagari Publications is the world's biggest permaculture producer, so they are a publisher of books. They are, as a lot of people in permaculture do, they are self-published. Again, that's basically following the community-supported model of business. Community-supported enterprise is really cooking in America now. I've been involved with my work over there with quite a lot of CSEs. So following the same sort of business model as happens with community-supported agriculture, there are now community-supported enterprises of all different types and descriptions, which I think is fantastic. So that instead of people being cost receivers, they're actually cost makers, right? And that's the problem with agriculture, is that they're price takers as opposed to price makers, right? And that's been the big shift in agriculture post-war. So, and that's why now we have more people living in cities than we do in the country. And there's, in the United States, a very scary statistic is that there's more people in jail than there are farming. Right, so that's the type of value that we place on a key industry such as agriculture.
Yeah, there's like in Europe, like in, say for example in Austria, there's this, no one wants to farm because it's too difficult to get up early and milk the cows, and you can get the city jobs.
Well, because they're not valued.
But there's farmland going begging. Like,
I know. There's lots of land going begging everywhere, but it's not a valued profession because people haven't got their marketing right. And there's lots of examples where that's not the case. Anyway, so those guys having a crack down there still, which is good. They're just changing the way they're doing things, which is totally up to them. Site design and development and research and community services. Well, David and Sue have got their little 1 hectare patch. So it follows a different model to, say, the Brookmans, where the Brookmans have got 40 hectares and they're in the business of producing export commodity. Right? When I say that, it's exported to outside of their farm. Right? Meliadora, much of the stuff is actually being cycled within. So you might say that this is perhaps a more classic permaculture model around the original intent of permaculture, which was to radically increase the production within a unit of area such that we can then convert a lot of land that's in agriculture back into Zone 5. That was one of the original intents of permaculture as outlined in Permaculture 1. Right? Somehow, that may well have been forgotten along the way, but that's up to people, right? We know how to produce a lot of food in a unit of area, perhaps better than anybody, right? But how that translates to other people is, well, that's a market opportunity. It's not a way that we can then look at what I don't know if they still use it as the third ethic of permaculture, which was reduce population and consumption and return surplus. It's now gone to fair share or something, whatever that means.
Okay, so return surplus originally meant back to Zone 5.
Yes, reduce. I think the most powerful statement there is reduce population and consumption. No one talks about reducing growth.
Well, right. People get fined for talking about.
Yeah, exactly, because that's part of what we would call the 3 tiers of economy now, is that you need to have constant population growth, but you also need to increase productivity, and I forget the other one, but there's those two. If you look at productivity gains, give much more value to a community than population growth does.
Population is easy.
And when we talk about holistic management, we'll get a bit more sophisticated about that, because that deals with the whole discussion around population in a much more sophisticated manner than we are able to within the convention of permaculture.
Can I just confirm what I think I heard you say, that the third part about returning surplus was about getting more Zone 5. It wasn't about sharing the surplus amongst people.
It is about doing that, but it's also about, you know, you can take it as that. I mean, you know, if you look at the first chapter of the Permaculture Manual, it's the shortest chapter there is in the book.
Yeah.
Right? So it's up to us to, just as people do with the Bible, expand the interpretation as far as they want to, and they do, right? But it's also important for us, if we're trying to understand these things, actually go back to the genesis of these ideas and see where they came from. And that's going back to Permaculture 1, right? And reading through that. And it's pretty clear. And talking to the people who were there at that time, Mr. Holmgren and Mr. Mollison. And, you know, it's pretty clear what their intention was there. But just things, you know, you do something like this and, you know, people become involved and they start to get very expansionist in their ideas and their applications of how this stuff can go. Anyway, that's one of the reasons why I like to bring the holistic management stuff into the domain of permaculture discussion, because it very clearly outlines some of the premises that we need to look at, I believe. So let's just keep moving on. So these guys have a similar business model, in fact, to Bill Mollison and Lisa Mollison, where their main business is book publishing, but they also do the site tours, extension, and they also are a local food distribution centre, so they are like a CSA hub. So people come to their property and pick up the box veggies and all of that sort of thing, and they provide into all of that, and they've stimulated a lot of that activity. And David does consultancy as well and development work, but pretty well within the region that he's working. He doesn't do a lot of projects, and he doesn't do very many.